Today is 16th of August 2017. We are talking with Nina Rose at her flat in Stockholm. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
For having us at your place. Can you tell me a bit about yourself, where you have born, what kind of family you have, from maybe a bit about your parents?
I was born in 1982 in Stockholm, and I have two brothers, one older brother and one younger brother. And my parents live in Stockholm, and my mother is from Warsaw, and she's Jewish with a Polish-Jewish family history. And my dad is Swedish, from Swedish working class, actually. And they met long before I was born, and they are still together. And they live not far from here. And I live here with my, not husband because we're not married, but we've been together for 14 years and we have two children. And I've practically lived in Stockholm all my life. I've been traveling, but not. I was studying here in Stockholm. I've been studying in Karolinska Institute Medical School, and now I work as a physician at the university hospital here.
Okay, that's interesting for me. To ask you, what do you know about the way how your mother emigrated to Sweden? What were the causes?
I've learned more and more throughout the years, and I think it took me quite long to know, or for her to tell me, or I don't know if she didn't really tell me when I was younger or if I didn't really understand, but I was in Warsaw with her when I was 18, and then she showed me, for example, very nice cafe in the Wojciechowski Park, and she told me that they used to hang out there when they were kicked out of the university, and I didn't really, I'm not sure I knew that before. And maybe that's also how she got to know other Jewish people her age, for example, even though they went to school together. And we passed by her old school where she went when she was about 7, and she told me that her and her best friend, they were sitting in the back and the teacher wouldn't let them answer the questions. But that was, long before 68. She was 7, she's born 49. And then she's told me about how they were frequently called to the, I don't know what it's called, like City Hall or something like that, to please sign the papers that they are no longer Polish citizens. And that after a couple of years of that, and kicked out of the university and losing jobs, and they were too afraid to stay, and they left. And I also know from when I was even younger, I got a diary when I was 8. That was yellow with a little locker, and she really encouraged me to write a diary because she couldn't keep her diaries when they left. That's what she told me, because they read everything, so she didn't want to, so she got rid of them. So that's something I know. And I remember a situation from when I was maybe 14. I had a new friend, and my friend had another friend that actually was called Nina, and that her mother was also Polish. So that was funny. She had two friends who were called Nina with Polish mothers. And then my mother said, yes, but that's not the same thing. We're not here for the same reason.
So that other mother is just not Polish Jewish, is just Polish.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't know much about her history though. Yeah, so those are some things that, you know, come in anecdotes throughout the years. And otherwise I feel I don't know that much, really.
But if you would just try to describe what kind of life your mother had in Poland, what you would say?
Growing up?
I mean, yeah, was it, what kind of, because this is what is interesting for me, what kind of image of life in Poland your mother transmitted to you? I mean, I don't know if in like very conscious or unconscious way.
Yeah.
But was it good or only bad or only good?
No,
or how,
it was
kind of
both. I mean, they were academic middle class, and they had, I mean, both parents were educated and had jobs and apartment, and she had a nanny. So I think it was, you know, mainly a quite good life. And then it was these other sides, like people from outside treating them differently. Like she remembers she was treated differently than her classmates, for example. So both good and bad.
But when you came to Poland first time, this is, you said with your, you were 18.
Yeah, it was not my first time, but yeah, I was there when I was 11, I think, I don't know how old I was. I was there, my younger brother's born 88, and he was a couple of, maybe we were there 92, 93, something like that. So that was the first time I was there.
And you remember what was your impression?
Oh, then we went to Gdansk and we went swimming on a beach, and we met another family. I remember playing with that girl. I don't remember any like political things or personal history things from that travel that I remember.
And you remember on the next travel that was different when you were 18?
Yeah, I think my mother then wanted to tell me other things when I was older.
What about your childhood? You were growing aware of that your Jewish identity. What was then meaning for you? You know what you were.
I grew up quite in a traditional Swedish way, and actually quite Christian way. You know, we celebrate Christmas and all of that. And I also think that I've always had the Jewish identity as a thing. So I don't know much about Jewish traditions growing up as a child from my family. Or my mother didn't celebrate. I know my mother didn't celebrate Jewish holidays in Poland when she was growing up. And she was around 11 when she found out she was Jewish, I know. Because my uncle, who looks very Jewish, very much, he was beaten in school and called bad words and Jew in it. And so he came home crying and said, oh, they called me this and they gave me this blue. What is even a Jew? Am I a Jew? And it's like, yeah, yes, you are. So that's even how they got to know about it. And I think I got it. Of course, my mother told me I was Jewish. And then I got it also from school and from other people. I remember I must have been 11 or 12 when we were studying different religions. And I know my teacher asked me, so how do you do this in Judaism? And I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also that, you know, being something else than the others. I've always had a little bit of that feeling, mostly in a good way, like I have something unique, but also not that. Like, I've had this discussion about being in the Scouts. Is it called Scouts? Do you know what it is? Yeah. Which is from the beginning a Christian group. And for me it was, I think everyone would be welcome if you wanted to go, and they don't talk that much about God and Jesus, but it's still from the beginning something Christian, and I feel maybe I'm not really welcome there. And my friends who are not Jewish, most of my friends are non-Jewish, they don't really understand that thing. Why not? Why didn't you just go if you wanted to go? I didn't even want to go, but I don't think I would have gone anyway, because being a bit afraid of not feeling welcome because of that. And actually the past years, I don't know, political winds in all of Europe is quite different now, and past years in Sweden too, and sometimes I'm afraid to, I've now begin to think that maybe I shouldn't tell people I'm Jewish. Maybe it's not a good thing, just anyone knows I'm Jewish, because I'm afraid of people hating me for it, and maybe wanting to hurt me or my family. Or, for example, I worked in a workplace, and we were talking about, like, what's your name from? And sometimes I just say, oh, my mother is from Poland and I got her name. And then for some people I say, yeah, it's Rosa, and it comes from Rosengarten and Rosenberg, which was my grandparents' name. And then they changed their name after World War II. And then most people then understand, okay, so you're Jewish. So I don't tell everyone that. And in that workplace that I worked 1.5 years ago, I waited deliberately for a couple of months before I even told them that this is why. Because I wanted them to know me a little bit and to like me before they knew. And then we went to lunch, all the doctors went to lunch every Thursday together. And one day someone told, blah, 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 the Jews, blah, 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 with the US something, conspiracy kind of thing. And then another one is like, you gotta be quiet, you gotta be quiet because she's Jewish.
So this is how it is, because I don't know, in Sweden, that as well, that there is a, you don't feel like that is comfortable to say it just like normal, neutral way. Like.
I normally do, and I've done that for all my life until a couple of years ago, really, I think.
So this is the changing of
it's a little
atmosphere.
Yeah, I think so. But then I haven't really met any. Well, throughout, I've always met people, for example, blaming me for things happening in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Of course, I mean, that happened first time when I was, 10. I had to answer to that, and I still do. And that, of course, pisses me off. I mean, I can't be responsible for what happens in another country, as well as you as a Swedish Christian person can't be responsible for what Donald Trump does right now. You have the same religion, you both celebrate Christmas. I celebrate Christmas. So that kind of thing. And then there are some other people that said, oh, of course, Jews, they are really good at math, so of course you became a doctor. So,
So that kind of really flat stereotypes, really like...
Yeah,
really,
it comes
basic,
up.
Simple,
Yeah. now and then. I don't think it's very often, but yeah.
But how do you think about yourself? This is like you are just Polish Jew, Swedish Polish Jew, or I don't know.
Not so much Polish, I think, because I haven't been so much to Poland. I don't speak Polish. I understand some words. I would like to speak Polish. I think it would be easy for me to learn Polish since I've always heard it. And I can always recognize people in the crowd, or at work, for example, there are a lot of Polish patients. So I can always hear on the accent that they're Polish, and people are, maybe she's Russian, no, she's Polish, that kind of thing. But then there's also the difference between the the Swedish Jews and the Polish Jews, or Eastern European Jews in Sweden. I think a lot of Jews coming from Poland, they weren't traditional Jews, really. They grew up in the communist Poland and didn't celebrate much and didn't do much. My mother told me now that she thinks that a lot of the recipes that her mother cooked, for example, these are not Polish meals. This is Jewish. Only she didn't know that. But they didn't celebrate much. A friend of my mother told this very funny story, I think, when he came to Sweden in '69. And he and two other male friends were invited to this Swedish Jewish family that had 3 daughters. And they were all in their 20s something. And he thinks the plan from the parents, of course, was that maybe one of the sisters would like one of the boys and they would have a Jewish match, and that's great. And they didn't know anything about how to be Jewish, and they gave him a kippah and he didn't know how to put it on. He dropped it in the soup. And one of the sisters is an author, and she had a book signed, I don't know when that was, but maybe 20 years later. And he told me he was standing in the queue to have her autograph in one of the books that she was selling there, and just to see if she recognized him. And she did, and they started talking a little bit. And then she told him that her mother at that dinner called her daughters into the kitchen and just said, "They're not Jewish. You're not gonna go out with any of those."
But so there's that image of, like you said, Polish or East European Jew. It's just Jew like. In the sense,
yeah, more like Jewish by blood and not so much by tradition. I think not so much religious. Maybe, and I think that maybe has changed now. That I think a lot of my mother, for example, we started to celebrate Hanukkah and things like that a little bit maybe 10 years ago. So when I was 25, and she wants to learn. And I think a lot of those Polish Jewish people I know living in Sweden wants to learn and wants to know more that they didn't growing up. But the Swedish Jews, they know because they grew up with it.
So you think it's also just influence of, let's say, Swedish Jews as well? I mean, I cannot. What are the reasons of trying to? Because somebody could be just not religious in general. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think people like to learn more about their family history and what's in my family from before, and learning about that. I think I'm also more interested in my family history in general now than I was when I was 15 or 20. I was just focusing on my teenage life.
Yeah.
In another book like that.
But do you, I mean, what is for you that kind of, because you learn about certain traditions, how to celebrate, yes? This is something that you are just looking for some certain dimensions, you know, of being a Jew, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. And then I make jokes about it, like like to my husband, and so now you see the Jews are much better.
But there is what your husband thinks about all that.
He thinks it's funny. I don't know. Like he has brown eyes, brown. Now the hair is short, but otherwise it's curly, and he's super Swedish. So I just make jokes about, you know, don't tell my mother he's not Jewish, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I don't think he. I mean, he doesn't care if I'm Jewish or not Jewish. I don't think he would care at all.
Yeah. Did you know your grandparents?
Yes.
And what are your memories about them?
My grandfather died when I was three and a half, and my grandmother died when I was 10. But my grandmother, we were often there for like Sunday dinners, or so I remember her apartment and things like that. She always wore long sleeves, like even in the summer, in a warm day, because of the tattoo on her arm. And I know, but I don't really remember that myself, but my mother told me that it was Schäfer. It's a sort of a dog, often used as a police dog, but it's a normal, you know, family dog too, mostly.
Yeah.
And there was a family having one of those dogs in her house, and that she couldn't stand that. Like she needed to. That gave her very bad dreams and made her really afraid, because it was the same kind of dog that the SS men had. So I knew that. But from her, she made this kind of chicken soup that might be one of those more Jewish kind of recipes. Otherwise, I don't remember much about her in a Jewish special way. More a grandmother, like any.
They were speaking like Swedish, good Swedish, yeah?
Yeah.
Just,
yeah, we spoke Swedish.
But in family, where you had possibility to hear Polish then?
My mother spoke a lot of Polish on the phone, and with friends being over, and neighbors, and we had a Polish nanny staying with us, taking care of my younger brother. So they spoke Polish. She spoke Polish to my brother. I didn't understand much, I think. So I've just heard it at home, but not so much directed to me. I don't remember ever speaking Polish to my mother, or my mother speaking Polish to me. I know I refused when I was very young to speak Polish to her, and then she just didn't try more.
And what do you think, what was then the reason that you refused?
I think it was in the same, it was when I started preschool or kindergarten. And so I wanted to speak what everyone else spoke. It's what I've heard, but I don't remember that. I was like 1 year old or 1.5, I don't know, very young. But before that, she spoke Polish to me and my older brother, apparently. So that's maybe why my older brother speaks better Polish than me, and then my younger brother speaks better Polish than me because he had that Polish babysitter and didn't start kindergarten when he was very young. And then my dad went to school to learn Polish. So he also speaks Polish better than me. So I'm the worst one in the family. Oh.
Yes. It's interesting. And so, did you ever were thinking? I mean, have you any in any situation did you have a feeling that you are the child of immigrant?
Yes. I think always, in a way, I've had that feeling. Because I knew my mother was from Poland and I knew she was Jewish, and she spoke another language, and she bought a pair of shoes to my brother, so he must have been, I don't know, early teenage, maybe I was 9, 10 or something, and then they didn't fit, so she went back to the store to change them, and then they called her very bad racist. She went there with her friend, so they spoke Polish when they came into the store, and they were called very bad racist stuff, and they didn't want to change the size of the shoe for her. And they just threw her out of the store. So, and that was, that I know, quite rare things to happen. But you know, you're anyway aware that it can happen to you and not to someone else. Yeah. I think also I was in a very like Swedish schools with everyone had Swedish parents, and actually most of the children with the browner skin were adopted, and it was not many. But I had a feeling, I don't really know from where, but that some kids are not like worthless, but more that you knew that they were not so Swedish in a way. And I was also, if the teacher, I mean, I'm very light, and a few people think I look Jewish, and from time to time I meet people who just, I knew you were Jewish anyway, but mostly not. But when they knew, I was also put in that group of not totally Swedish people, or that had something else too.
And this is what you had.
This is a feeling I've, yeah. For example, that I was asked about traditions or things from the Old Testament. I didn't know better than anyone else. So I was expected to know things about other countries or about
but
Judaism.
If you would be like, let's say, stereotypical the Swedish Jew, you would know. You would come from. Yeah. This is just a case of different.
Yeah.
This is that, because this is what I'm wondering today. This is it. What it means Polish Jew in Sweden, and I think that maybe Polish Jew, it means, this is very interesting for me. So this is based on that experience and on who your mother and people like her are. So that the what you said, Eastern Jews, that they were just non-religious, and they were just like very. There was a lack of the practice of traditions and everything.
Yeah.
So this is what you.
Yeah, and things were expected from me that I didn't live up to because I was not that stereotype that they thought.
Yeah, but from the other hand, there is so many ways to, at least when you look, for example, on the history of Polish Jews, there is so many ways to be a Jewish.
Yeah.
Like you can
Of
be
course.
in that way, and you can be secular, you can be just communist, you can be just Zionist or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
I think from a Swedish perspective, I don't know if people made a different Jew, Swedish Jew, Polish Jew. I haven't really noticed that so much.
But did you encounter anyhow the term of Polish Jew in Sweden? It exists in public sphere or whatever?
No, I don't think so.
In Swedish, even in Swedish language, does it exist? No, you never heard about such a thing?
No, I don't think. Only people who are friends with Polish Jews or second generation of Polish Jews would know, but not in the Swedish mindset. I don't think so.
And did you, because I know that your grandmother, she wrote the memoirs.
Yes.
Did you read them?
No, my uncle translated it a couple of years ago, I think you know. I haven't actually read it because I haven't really been able to, actually.
I mean, in what sense? Not to...
Emotional. I made some homework for school in maybe 7th, 8th grade something, and then my mother translated from Polish just to me some parts of it that I wrote about, but otherwise I haven't read much. Which I think has more to do with I don't remember what exact year he made it. Maybe you know, a couple of years ago.
Translation.
Yeah. Maybe.
I don't know. I think Kuba told me that it was like 2 years ago, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, maybe 3 or 4. I don't know, something like that. And I just think in these years, have been in an emotional state that I was afraid to read it. Having small children, and my husband was out of work for some time, and I was stressed out at work and other things that I do, so I didn't feel stable enough, actually, to be honest.
No, I mean...
I want to read them, but I haven't done it for that reason. It's not only time.
Yeah. And because you were with after the trip to Poland, let's say when you were 18 with your mother, then later you have you traveled? Have you been in Poland after that? Later?
No. Yeah, no. I actually we've been to Poland a few more times as tourists when I was younger too. We were in Zakopane and in the mountains, but not after that. I haven't. Me and my brothers plan to go. My youngest is now 4, so I think when she was 1, we planned to go together, just the three of us, and no girlfriends or boyfriends or kids, just us, and to go and also visit your museum. So I would like to do that, and I also would like to go to Poland with my mother. I think since I've had so small children, it's been hard to be away from them, and the travel wouldn't be the same if I brought them. So I've been waiting a little bit, and now they're so old, well, 4 years old, the youngest one, but still, now it would be okay to leave them home and go. So I would very much like to do that.
And what you would like to do there in Vietnam?
I would like to see more of Warsaw and where my mother lived and where she went to school, and to hear her tell me more about her childhood and young adulthood and her story. And to have time for that. And actually when I was maybe 14, 15, I was very close to going on this trip for teenagers to Auschwitz. And I would like to do that too. I haven't been there.
But Kuba was.
Kuba was.
Was he telling you something about the trip?
I guess he was, but we haven't talked about it since then. Do you know how old he was? Maybe he was, I think he was 15.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so then I was almost 12. Yeah, so we talked about it, but maybe it's not the same when you're 12 and now, of course.
But do you think that the trip with your mother would to Poland would? I mean, you have that kind of desire to. Do you have that kind of desire to somehow understand more who was your mother before she came here, like before she immigrated in here?
Yes. And more about how was her life, and the different when she was more of a child and more of a teenager, and more about, you know, the years right before because she came in 71, so she came kind of late, and what was those years like? I would like to know more about that. Very much.
But you can just ask.
I know. We have these family dinners where we're 15 people. Yeah, I can, but I feel I need to be alone with her for that.
Yeah. Understand. But it's just because it's you know, it's you think it's traumatic to her to talk about this. It's hard to her.
I think so in a way, because she hasn't talked about it that much. So I think so. And actually to me too. It's quite hard to hear about. I'm afraid what I would hear, I think. So that's why I don't want my kids to be around me when I would talk to her about it.
But how do you think, because your mother, how I know she started to coming back more often to Poland.
Yeah.
What Yeah. I mean, I know that she has a friends there, yes.
Yeah.
Still.
And people who moved back, also friends who left Poland and then moved back to Poland.
But did your mother ever was thinking about that?
Not that I know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Maybe she did.
Yeah,
I don't know if she thinks about it, but I think if she did, she has her children and grandchildren here. So I don't think she would do it because of that. And she has a Swedish husband. He wouldn't want to move to her. He doesn't understand.
No.
So I don't think... If the situation was different for her, maybe she would even think about it. But I don't know if she has that desire, actually. I never asked.
Have you ever think about what would be, I don't know, life of your mother if she would not
Have
emigrated?
left?
Yeah.
No, not really. I couldn't imagine her staying.
Yeah.
But they must have I mean, it wasn't too clear for them to emigrate because then they would earlier. But maybe that was more up to her parents.
You mean in the 50s or
or in the late 60s. I mean, why didn't they leave in 69? They stayed for 2 more years.
Yeah.
So there must have been doubts. Because most people left earlier than she did.
And but maybe
so must have been something keeping them there. Anyway, since And her younger brother, he emigrated quite soon after they came to Sweden to New York. So he didn't want to stay here anyway. But I've more thought about what my mother, I mean, she works as a journalist and to write, and also she's worked at the radio. So she works with Swedish language a lot. But I can hear from a lot of her friends that are married to other Poles that they don't speak so well Swedish, for example. So I've thought about those things. That makes a difference maybe for assimilation and learning the language and coming into having Swedish friends. Not that, I mean, she got a lot of friends, Swedish friends on her own, not just through my dad, not at all, but still. And then also she chose to study journalism, so I guess she very much wanted to learn and be a part of Sweden, Swedish life and language.
So she never was telling you about some problems, or about problems of after coming in here to Sweden?
Not that much, really. I know they, when they came to Sweden, they were placed in a... I'm from Stockholm, so I wouldn't even call it a town, but a small place to live. And they're also from Warsaw. It's a big city, and that they didn't want to stay there. And also, I think she started to study physics after about 3 months in Sweden, and that way she learned Swedish. So I think she was quite, straightforward on learning Swedish and get an education and be able to stay here very early. And also not so traumatized that she was able to do that. Well, if you see, we have a lot of refugees coming to Sweden in the past years now, who came directly from war and from big traumas. So I think that's different. So I've been thinking about that too. Some of her friends are more what to say, like critical about people coming to Sweden now and not getting a job and not. I think, but it's also a different situation from when you came.
And what do you think about that?
Oh, makes me annoyed, of course. Not being able to see other people's miseries or situations, or also the Swedish system and society is much different now from the beginning of the 70s. You could just get a job and you could just start studying, and if you already had an education you could just start working, and now it doesn't work like that. And then you don't even, also the difference of coming directly from big traumas and less big traumas. Also, I mean, we're Europeans, Poland and Sweden is not very far away. A lot of culture is quite similar comparing to a lot of other countries in the world, when they come to Sweden now. So
yeah, there's just like smaller cultural difference.
Yeah.
That's especially when you because I think that's like your mother, that immigrants, most of them, they want to really integrate into reality.
Yeah, they say it's one of the most well integrated and assimilated immigrants in Sweden.
Like Polish? Or?
Maybe not specifically Polish, but there are a lot of Polish Jews that came those years. And then also from the Balkan War in the beginning of the 90s, also like well assimilated population.
Yeah.
Which I think has a lot to do with it's quite similar culture. Also maybe what kind of people are coming. It's much easier if you're, for example, went to university. Or if you can't even read, of course it's different.
But you said also at the beginning that your father, he's like from, you said, from working class, yeah, and like mother, she's from higher class,
yeah.
And then when she came here, the situation changed, or she stayed still on that social status remained also in Sweden, or
her social status. Yes, in a way. Of course, it's different if you're Swedish, if you speak Swedish, but she went to university, so
it's like you refer to the education.
yeah, and then the kind of jobs that you get and apply for, and so yes. And my dad, he was in university when they met, so I mean he came from working class and was the first in his family to have higher studies at all. So it's both different countries, a little bit of different culture, and also different class that they came from. My parents.
But that, I mean, it has any meaning? It has any.
Well, you can see they have a bit different interests. I think my mother is not that interested in lower class problems or things like that. And, we have a very strong literature in Sweden of working class from last century, beginning of last century, and she doesn't find that interesting, I think, which my dad does, and I think it's interesting. So I think they read a little bit different kind of books, for example. It's not huge differences, but
no,
in that sense.
So you rather don't. What is your? If you would try to explain what is could be a meaning for you of Poland for you, or Polish culture to you, that your mother, I don't know, she was somehow introducing you to some Polish or Polish Jewish culture, and any kind of forms like literature or whatever, or movie or.
Not very much, I would say. She was also not welcome to travel to Poland until 90, and after the wall broke down. So no, I always thought she didn't have very warm feelings for Poland or specific Polish culture, for example. So she didn't, pass that on at all.
Okay.
But then I like Polish books, for example. No, not really. Not if it wasn't like Polish Jewish, and that would be more in recent years than in my childhood. I know I read children's books about Second World War, and
Really? So
yeah, not heavy fact books, but of course Anne Frank's diary. But then I remember another children's book that they still have, that I thought I was gonna borrow and read to my kids. 2 friends, and then one had her favorite cuddling, what's it called? Just see if I can see something lying around,
Teddy bear?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Teddy bear, there was a pink rabbit. I think it's called something with the pink rabbit. And then for her birthday, she got another one. And then they were friends. And then the one with the pink rabbit, she's Jewish, and her friend is not Jewish. And then they have a fight. They are, I don't know how old they are supposed to be, 5, 6 years old. And then they have a fight, and then the non-Jewish friend says, yeah, but you're just a simple Jewish girl anyway. and then they just, you know, one of them goes home, and then it was the crystal night that night. And the Jewish girl disappears and never comes back, and the friend keeps the pink rabbit. Yeah, it's called Hitler Stole the Pink Rabbit. It's called. I don't know how old I was when I read it, but it's not much text, so it's really a children's book. So I've read that kind of books.
And what is that book called?
Yeah.
Fascism.
It's a very new book. It just came out before the summer, and it's a friend of a friend who has made it. So I bought it. It's called What's Really Fascism? And he interviews an historian and then writes about that to explain what fascism is.
Interesting, but it's
Yeah.
so
it's a
in
serious
Swedish-
book.
Swedish
You can. It's in Swedish.
but also in Swedish, like context.
I haven't read the whole thing, but it's. I gave it to my brother, so it's. Yeah, it's serious. Yeah. You can see it later if you like. It's in Swedish though.
Okay. I hope we will see someday in Polish Museum.
Yes.
I would be happy to talk with you also then, and also this is what we are also talking with Simon. That it's really interesting that you're like that kind of recreate. I don't know, not recreation. That you know. Start to, as a family, in fact, how I understand, to celebrate and get to know more about Jewish traditions. And
Yeah.
this is what we're talking with Simon, that would be interesting, to look what will happen, what,
We really did. The first
Yes.
Pesach, or we were, we have this kind of book, and you're supposed to have this thing. Okay, we'll, arrange this like this, and trying to, read and follow a bit.
Because this is just like, like spiritual journey, I think.
Yeah.
This is.
Yeah.
It's.
But that's also why, because I've always had this identity in a way, but then I don't know much about it. It's, it's somehow a clash or inner clash. Or, of course, you want to know about your own family history and stories and try to get that, but it's also the part of other people seeing me as Jewish, and I don't know much. I would like to know what is this that I am, like my uncle said, they call me a bloody Jew. What is that? Am I that? What am I then? So, yeah.
So, but you think that it's just like, because there's that also, in the context of 68 and emigration, there is also often that kind of, that immigrants are telling that, before 68, I was a Jew, but I didn't really care about it.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about it.
Yeah.
And I was like 68 enhanced my Jewishness, or in fact, yesterday one guy, he said that 68 made a Jew of me.
Yeah, I think so.
So this is like the problem of, in fact, of relation with external with society, because this is what. Yeah,
That's the same for me. Like if people ask me, like, so what do you as a Jew think about what Israel is doing? You know, that makes me a Jew, and I have to talk. If I ever talk about it, like just because, I mean, it's an interesting conflict anyway, I know I'm speaking as a Jew, like in the room.
Yeah, but it's insane.
And I agree, but that's, so I have to watch my tongue much more than if I wouldn't be a Jew. And yes, all of those things make me a Jew. I went to a Jewish summer camp when I was 12 that my mother sent me to, and that didn't make me feel more Jewish at all, because I didn't know what they were doing, really. I didn't know the kids. Most of the kids there were actually going to a Jewish school, so it more felt like I was going to some other school's summer camp. And then there were some people that didn't go there. No, it's actually more of the other kind of external impacts. But yeah, I can really relate to that. From 68 made me a Jew. I can relate to that.
Can you tell more about that camp? This is interesting because it was organized by whom? By like Jewish.
Yeah, Swedish Jewish Society.
Swedish Jewish Society. So
and it's every year, and everyone goes there. And also people can ask me, like, okay, so you're Jewish, so have you ever been to Glemsta? Yes, I have. Okay, so then you are a Jew. I can officially, because I went there once. And I cried and wanted to go home. My mother told me I did once. I don't remember that, but I had some friends, and I also had a good time. But I didn't know many kids. I didn't know any kid when I went there, so of course it was a bit, you know, when most of the other kids already knew each other. And also I remember that we had a theme. We were also supposed to learn, of course, about Judaism and things like that. Would you like me to put the light on? It doesn't matter. Ah, sorry. And then they had a theme that was called Israel. And then someone else told me later they always have the theme Israel. And I was like, what do I have to do with Israel? My mother's from Poland. That's the country. So I wasn't. If I say I don't relate much to Poland, I do a bit. And then the external impact put me more to say things about Israel more. But growing up, I didn't think, I don't really have that much to do with that country. And we went there to Israel when I was 15, my family, on holiday. And I remember a taxi driver, Arab taxi driver, that also told me, like, yeah, you Christians and us Arabs, we have to stand together against the Jews. Like, yeah.
Where, in Israel?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay.
But
so,
what was, what do you remember from the trip, and what was...
well, we were in one of my mother's very close friends. She's also from Poland and left, I think, 69 to Israel. And she lives in Tel Aviv, and her family lives in Tel Aviv. So we visited them, and we went to Jerusalem and touristing, and we went to Eilat. And I made friends. I have a Jewish friend, a Jewish friend that I met like half a year before we went there. And we actually stayed in the same hotel in Eilat with her family. And she has relatives in Israel. Her mother is from Israel, moved to Sweden. And her dad actually converted to Judaism, but they're very Jewish and more of the Swedish Jewish, and she went to Jewish school. And so I went to her school when I was 15, just to, you know, look around. And
in Israel?
No, in Sweden.
In Sweden.
So I played a lot with her when we were there, and we visited the place where Yitzhak Rabin was killed, and I made, when I started the high school, I went to like science program in high school. So we only had very small part of history class. And then we could do whatever we wanted. And I made about Yitzhak Rabin and showed pictures from that. And then we could also choose if we wanted to hand in something written or have a presentation for the class. And I chose to have presentation for the class. And I was the only girl in the class that did that, and just some of the boys. So the other ones didn't want to stand in front of the class. And I think that presentation made the teacher like me for the next 3 years. So I remember, like, I don't have to do much after that, because...
Good move.
Yes, it was a good move. Apparently it was a good presentation. So I got the highest grade always from her, but I don't know if I did anything else very well. Yeah, we traveled around and saw all the places that you're supposed to see as a tourist too.
But do you have now any kind of, what is Israel for you? Has any kind of, are you interested in Israel as a I don't know, society, country or place somehow?
Yeah, I think I have a stronger feeling for Israel now than I did growing up. I definitely have. Also see, actually my husband and I were talking a couple of years ago, because, you know, one of the like right-wing racist parties in Sweden was the third biggest one last election in Sweden, and in 1 year there's the other election. We don't know how it will go, but it's not just because of that party, and not just because about general more racist atmosphere in Sweden, but yeah, more about that. So we talked about, like, where should we emigrate if we have to emigrate? And that's also another thing that I think made me different from other Swedes. I've always been engaged in NGOs, always put my free time in different kinds. And I remember one of those, maybe I was 18, 19, and we had, someone had a workshop with us talking about refugees and what happens, and it was this kind of, okay, so what if there would be a bomb in Stockholm, where would you go? And then everyone would like say, oh, I would go to my relatives in this city outside Dalarna, I don't know, anything like that. And okay, so if there was bombing in all of Sweden, where would you go? And this kind of talk. And people thought it was so interesting, like, oh, I've never thought what would happen if I would have to move. And I was like, have you never? I have. Like, throughout, I've always thought maybe I would have to emigrate ever in life, because probably of being a Jew.
This is what you thought. I mean, you were thinking about.
Yeah, I remember sitting there and being surprised that none of the other kids had, before this workshop, thought, where would I emigrate if I had to?
But you had.
I had.
And it
As a child.
Yeah.
As a teenager.
And then it would be Israel. I mean.
No, I don't think so. My uncle lives in Chicago now, so that would be an option.
Yeah.
For example, or I studied French in Paris, so maybe France would. And when I talked to my husband, I don't know when that was, a year ago or something. So, but Israel would maybe be a choice, but then I'm not very much for the politics there anyway. But it would be I would be welcome there. So that's why it's an option. I don't long to go there. I don't desire to. But I would be welcome anyway. And I can never be sure, especially since Trump, that I would be welcome in any country just like that. I can't be sure of that. Not that I'm, I'm not sure that would be okay. I think it would be okay, but I always know there's one country that I will always be sure to be welcome. Things can change in other countries.
Can you high school?
Yeah. Can I just 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, I started to engage a little bit in NGO, I think last year of high school, maybe. That was actually aiming for fair trade. I was not very engaged in that, but that's... and then I've kind of always been engaged in some NGO. And when I was studying, I was very engaged in sexual health and educating kids in Sweden. And it's about gender equality and HBTQ equality and things like that. And talking to teenagers in school about love and sex and how to relate to other people. And I did that a lot. I put a lot of time. And then I was also engaged on a national level in that and developing the organization and working together with Socialstyrelsen, which is like health authority in Sweden. And after that I've been engaged in it's Women's Doctors Society very much as a vice president for almost 7 years. I just quit that. Yes, I think it's always hard to say what is what, and both my parents have always been political and interested in politics, and we've been discussing politics around dinner table, and they've been listening to our thoughts. And we went to demonstrations on 1st of May, and me and one of my friends went to 8th of March demonstration together for the first time when we were 14, and that's how we became close friends, and we're still close friends. So I've always been engaged in some way. So maybe I think it's, of course, I don't know if it's the Jewish Polish or the working class or just interested in politics, a little bit of everything.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe you want to add something just at the end. There is something that you didn't say and you think it should be said.
I don't know. Maybe that I am a little bit ashamed that I don't know more. Actually. About my mother, about Poland, about
I think it's for everything has to be just the right time to do certain things. It's
Yeah.
you know,
I don't mean just for you being here, but that, you know, accolage, what's it called, like, that makes me think about it with your email, like, oh, maybe I should talk about this more, I should think about it more.
you know, I don't know. For me, it's very interesting because, of course, I know that there are all not the easy things, and like you said, also about your grandmother's memoirs. I understand that. I think because I heard a lot of stories that there were, you know, that took really like years that somebody was just able to read something written by parents or grandparents. So, you know, this is spiritual.
It's part
you
of
know,
being human. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's. Thank you. That was really.
Well, thank you.
Nice.